Right. Tim Price, I'm so happy to have you on the Everything Saxophone podcast. You know, we always meet up once a year at NAMM. We've been doing that for a number of years now. And you've also done an interview for my BAM radio show network. And it's so great to have you on the Everything Saxophone podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Cool. So you've been insanely busy since I saw you and jammed with you actually at NAMM. And I always say this story too. I've got to say this. Your sound is so insanely good and insanely powerful. Whenever you play, and I've got a lot of hair, my hair stands up. I mean, it's like, it's your projection is just insane. It's through the roof. And it's not, guys, it's not the equipment. The equipment makes you play more efficient, but it's not the equipment. You just know how to, you just know how to project. So I have to just put that out there.
Thank you. I've worked my whole life on that.
Yes, yes. So now talk to us. My God, you've been so busy. It's like I'm so glad you have the time for us today, but you barely have a minute to breathe. So talk to us about what you've been up to.
What I've been up to is for the past 7+ years, I've been doing quite a lot of work with Philadelphia Jazz Project in Philadelphia, of course, which was the brainchild of my buddy Homer Jackson. And this last year, after I came back from NAMM, which I had a very fruitful year, one of the best years yet, Lovano and I were in the Sax Dakota booth playing straight tenor and straight altos, totally improvised, and like Joe says, swirling sounds. And we had a ball. I got back home and I immediately continued rehearsing for the Satellites Are Spinning projects. We did quite a number, one a month. I wasn't involved in every one, but I was in quite a few of the Satellites Are Spinning, the Homage to Sun Ra, and that was happening. And then in the summer, we did Sidewalk Symphonies, which were basically pop-up concerts.
Awesome.
And that's something that people should look at doing in their cities. It's a way to expose jazz to the masses immediately. So we did like these pop-up concerts all through Old City in Philadelphia. That's where the Liberty Bell and Christ Church and all those places are. And it was fantastic. The first half of it I did with a saxophone quartet, totally improvised. The second half I did tenor, bass, and drums, cordless trio. So it was a very important thing. And we ended up at the very end of it in September on Strawberry Mansion's Bridge, playing on the bridge. So, I mean, man, I got a taste of that. And for those of you who are wondering, yeah, I played some Sonny on the bridge.
I was just thinking that. Oh my God, you read my mind. That's insane. So let me ask you something about those sidewalk pop-up concerts. Was it something where you just decided to play? Was it a paid gig?
Those were paid gigs. Those were paid gigs. Everything with Philadelphia Jazz Project has always been contracted. There's rehearsals depending on what's happening, and it's paid. There's no funny stuff, man. And if you're not there on time, you're under contract. It's a job.
Yeah, that's great.
Like I said, you're a professional musician, just like if I was working with, anyone else. It's a professional hit. It's done to the ultimate, and that's why I do it. Because if the business isn't happening, I don't want to play Seek and He Shall Find with some dude's emotions,
Yeah, definitely. That's good to know. So, all right, so you've done these sidewalk concerts, and you said you did them from
Sidewalk Symphonies,
excuse me. So, how often did you do those?
Every other day for the whole summer.
Wow. Holy cow. That's awesome. That's a lot of playing. That's awesome.
My chops feel great.
That's really cool. Now, how long were these Sidewalk Symphony gigs? An hour, 2 hours? How'd that work?
We'd play a set, we'd take a break, and play another set.
Cool. And in the middle of the day, or was it
We'd have one at let's say we'd have one at noon, and then we'd play 45 minutes, and then we'd have another one, and it worked out great. Coincidentally, one of the ones in one of the parks down near the riverfront, there was this amazing hawk, and he was there for the saxophone quartet. And I'm looking up, and I said to Terry Lawson, "Hey man, do you see that hawk?" And he said, "Yeah." So all right, and everybody was talking about this hawk. And the next time I came back, my man was still there, and it was an awesome looking hawk. I mean, it was just amazing, and a lot of the stuff like we played like at the at the visitor center, and these were outside, so no microphones, man.
Yeah.
This was pure, playing, and the people felt it because they could walk by and touch us. People were, taking pictures with their selfie sticks while we're playing.
Yeah, let me ask you too. I'm really curious. What was the turnout for people like? Did you get a lot of people come?
Fantastic,
Okay.
absolutely fantastic. People came back the next day that were tourists. They it was fantastic. Um, one guy sat down that it was on the 4th of July in the one visitor center cafe, which was super cool, and he sat down and he asked for a couple of tunes, and we played them. I mean, fortunately, you know, it was Philadelphia, so he said, do you guys play the Sidewinder? And yeah, man,
Yeah.
it's a national anthem down there, and we played Sidewinder, and I think he asked for something else, but we played it, and we had a ball.
Awesome. That's really cool. Now, I got to ask you, how did you initially get involved with this project?
Actually, Homer had contacted me. Somebody probably gave Homer my name. We did a pop-up concert in the Reading Terminal Market with a saxophone band, and we came in from different entrances of the Reading Terminal Market playing Tenor Madness. We had like about 10 saxophone players at least, and we came in from all these different areas blowing, and we met in the center of the market. It was deep.
That's
Magic.
cool. That's cool. That's really cool. And you know what's interesting?
Crazy.
Yeah, I haven't, I don't know if other cities throughout the country have done something like this. And we've spoken in the past before about, you know, jazz audiences dwindling and, what people's like definition of jazz is. Like, for example, I could share this story. A lot of times I get hired to play solo gigs and, people say they want a jazz musician. So I give them my set list and they're like, oh no, I wanted, like, can you play like, Kelly Clarkson, or can you play 1,000 Years, or can you play John Legend? And I'm like, okay, that's not jazz. People don't quite know what jazz is. So I guess my question to you is, first of all, it's awesome that you're able to do this in your hometown, but you know, how does someone start something like this up?
Well, this was Homer's idea. Homer has a million things that he comes up with, and he's got great conceptions, and he's got a business mind, and he saved a lot of these things and focused them and crystallized them. That's what happened. And I'm amazed at some of the stuff that he's thought of. And for another instance, when at the Coltrane at 90, when Coltrane's birthday was, 3 years ago or something like that, I played in front of the Coltrane House in West Philadelphia, where actually Fairmount Park section rather, and I was overwhelmed. Before the gig, I got there early and went over to the Coltrane House and sat in the steps and just vibed out.
Cool. That's really cool. That's really cool. In Long Island,
You
we have
need,
in Long Island we've got
you
that
need
Coltrane House, there that was just recently designated landmark status. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
the one in Philly is different because it shows the era that he was probably still with Miles then, and it shows and completely, you know, uh, demolishes people's thought of a jazz musician, and unstable and all that. What was happening is Coltrane was recording constantly, man. Coltrane was playing constantly. Coltrane was getting paid. Coltrane wasn't playing door gigs and doing that kind of stuff, playing eeny, meeny, minor, mo with money. Coltrane was dealing with it. And that's what you need to do. And I said this for years, and I'm not a big practitioner of, you know, putting a cup outside because it's after a while, it just doesn't work. Like Steve Goodson says, if somebody's getting paid and somebody paid $12 for a martini, you should get paid. And that's the most basic black and white knowledge I can say. And if you're a professional musician or professional player, yes, I know you want to play. Yes, I understand. But focus stuff in your basement, focus stuff in some studios. But we need more people that have the business aspect to talk to somebody in a business frame of mind.
Yes, and actually, this is it's so funny because we had plans for our conversation today and it's going off somewhere else. It's perfectly fine because we like to do this whenever we talk, which is awesome. But this truly is so important because the thing, from where I'm coming from, people don't respect what they don't pay for, and
Correct.
yeah, they don't. And unfortunately, well, fortunately, unfortunately, a lot of gigs that, a lot of people get are ones where they're essentially background music. They're playing cocktail hours. They're playing birthday parties, but it's background music because people have been conditioned to go to a restaurant and hear music in the background. And, good or bad, whatever you want to call that. But I'll tell you one recent experience I had where I got called to do a gig. It was a 100th birthday party for this woman who was very well known in this community. And it was at a banquet hall. And I was expecting it to kind of be background music. That's how they kind of said it. It's like, all right. No, everybody, they listened to me while they were eating. They didn't talk and they applauded. And I know this sounds terrible. I was shocked because, you get so used to playing, like I play large stages and that's a different thing. That's what's expected. But when you're doing these other types of, gigs and stuff like that, people generally, don't pay attention. Every single person there paid attention. That was one of the most amazing gigs, ever. And I guess the thing is that, you know, getting people to the point of appreciating what they're listening to and paying for it as opposed to, oh, sure, you can give me free music. That's great.
That's the ticket. People love jazz. A lot of people really love jazz. They want a different place to hear it. I've said that for years. They don't have the timetable to go out and be out, somewhere. And a lot of people don't drink. They know because of the situations. Many times on the way back from my gigs that I did in a nighttime section, of the clock in Philly, there was like, sobriety checks on the way up,
Oh, wow.
and I'm ready for that, man. I roll down the window and, I'm listening to Coltrane, Kula Samama, and smoking a cigar, so I certainly ain't drinking.
Yeah, I don't like drinking. Not that I can't. I don't like it. And I don't like, I personally don't like drinking before a gig. I'd rather, be present in doing that. So, you said something interesting though. People want to hear jazz in different places. What do you mean?
I think people are looking to get away from certain environs, not because they don't like it and not because it doesn't work. That's not my point. But there's a lot of people that would go to hear something at 5 o'clock in the afternoon after they got out of work and then go home. I've seen that happen in California.
Yeah, New York too. New York
Yeah, in
too.
New York too. Not as prevalent, but it's there. I do believe that I played 5 years at the garage in Greenwich Village. We played sometimes once or twice a month with an organ band. It was, you know, Greasy Tenor Madness, it was called. And Ryan Insomni was the other tenor player, who was one of my students. And Tom Abbott was the other tenor player. Three tenor players, organ and drums. And we had people's attention, but it was the last set of the night. So they're in there and they were drinking, but that's also in the village. So, the percent of people that were driving probably was very slow. We probably didn't have the percent like if I was in Asbury Park,
Yeah.
you know. But my point is, and I'm not an expert with business. I've had to do my own business in my life because that's just what's happening. I mean, you know, there's a lot of guys do their own business, but it chews up a part of your day. It's frustrating because no one wants to hear the word no, but you got to do it. And I also think there's so many people graduating and dudes in school, right? Check with your friends that are business majors. Check with your friends that have like these other skills and fuse that together. Create a fusion business wise between the artist and somebody who is developing some skills. I think it's a great thing. And I'm not talking about a booking agent, I'm talking about an entrepreneur, somebody who can get it cracking.
Yeah, because a booking that's a totally different thing. And
That's a totally different thing. No.
yeah, ideally that, that entrepreneur would have a music background, but maybe is going for business
Homer used
degree.
to be a DJ. You know, I mean, actually, not a DJ. Homer worked for WRTI. He did like, you know, he had jazz stuff on there. I remember it. I don't, I don't. That's not a DJ. What is that? A
Uh,
disc jockey?
yeah, disc jockey or radio announcer. Yeah, radio.
He was a radio guy, and he certainly has the persona for it. You know, he's one of the best, you know, guys I know as far as when he talks to you. You know, he really has, you know, character and a charming way of bringing things to people's attention, which is what we need. You know, we don't need somebody to get on the air and go, "Oh yeah, man, you know, I mean, I came up with this thing. You know, my girlfriend jumped out the window, and you know, like my dog, you know, flushed the cat down the toilet." You know, you don't need that, man. We need to get some clear cut ideas of employment. You know,
Yeah, because it's different. It's definitely different nowadays, and you've played with so many different people in so many different situations, and you can definitely attest to the fact that the scene is has changed, right? So much.
oh yeah, I mean, the scene has changed. The thing is, we've got more people now that sound fantastic. There's a there's a whole multitude of guys. What we need to do is get everybody working and moving, and also not just playing with your friends. I never learned anything when I left Berklee, and thank God John Laporta said to me, you need to go out in the world and do it. I'm not, this is, you're going to learn more than if I give you a job in a school as a teacher. And thank God he did that to me, because I had to go to auditions. I had to deal with other people in the human race. I had to deal with people that were completely sane. I had to deal with people that were completely out of their minds, and make it work. And so that's a lifelong course in humanistics, because everybody don't think like you or me. We're all different, and human nature is the whole deal. It's very tough. And when somebody's offering you a gig and the money's going back and forth, you what I call you're playing tug of war. Sometimes it's best to let go of the rope. You'll feel better.
Interesting. Interesting.
I mean, everybody always says different things, but I've learned when I play tug of war with somebody, and I try not to do it as much as I used to when I was younger, you really never come out like, there's always some kind of funky stuff that ain't working. Like all of a sudden the room for the band has 5 guys in it, and 2 beds and a floor. So, the business stuff I also think needs to be addressed more. And, you know, we need to have that done by professional musicians. That's a very different type of situation. I always thought some of the most greatest practitioners of the art form people are studying are the people that are out on the sidewalk and on the bandstand. And that goes hand in hand with the great people in the universities as well. But the real world is when the tune is counted off.
Yeah, yeah, but this is interesting too because I know
It's
you.
like how you and I know each other, really. I mean, we've talked so much and stuff, and I guess it was a couple times we got to play, and then we got to know something altogether different about each other.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
You know,
And it's interesting because back in the day, when you went to school, when I went to school, business was not addressed in colleges, and I've spoken with a lot of guests about this. Berkeley did set the stage, I think, in terms of being more practical, with their degrees. And I know Thornton out here is pretty, is certainly has some business courses and all that kind of thing. I always encourage my students that are music majors, you've got to take some business courses because no one will get you jobs, and you have to learn all aspects of business.
you got to learn to talk to people. I always, when I was younger, would talk to guys about stuff. Maybe it wasn't business. Maybe it was what song was that at the end of the set, you know, uh, and get to know where they were, what kind of life they were leading, and also how they handled things, how they handled a set, and how maybe in some cases they didn't handle a set.
Yeah, this is interesting because that's kind of one of the reasons why Nick and I created this podcast because we wanted people to, I don't want to ask the typical questions about, what's your gear and all that kind of thing. I mean, I could certainly ask that, but it's more into, what's going on? Like, what are you thinking about when you're performing, or what are you thinking about when you're doing this project, or, your life path, the big achievements that you had or the big lessons that you've learned. I think that it's kind of like what you're saying. It's that whole reaching out to people that like masters of the instrument, or people that are out in the business world, in music business, working right now. What are they doing? What have they done? I think it's funny. We also talked before this about the internet and how it's great, but it's also stale. It feels kind of stale. People aren't really talking to each other as much.
No, I also think it can get into something where, I mean, there's so many things that are reiterating the same stuff. Years ago, probably 17 to 20, I came up with all those exercises on Sax on the Web. That's a book and a half of material on major, minor, augmented, diminished, 2-5-1s, blues, rhythm changes, etc. Right? After that, okay, then you can get into some other stuff if you want to. But still, at the same point, you got to know how to play a melody. And playing a melody means going out on the bandstand. And sometimes when I do a workshop, in a college, not in a high school, the high school, I'm trying to get the kids to really like play and to, make a note feel good and show them like this is what's happening, and to listen to people like Houston Person and Gene Ammons as much as they can. They don't know those names, man, and God bless them because they try, and I've been successful. But when I'm in a college or somebody talks to me, and I know I got a comfort level with the person that they won't nut out on me, and we start talking about equipment, I said, where my equipment, I mean, we're all enamored by all this stuff that's coming out. It's fantastic, and the people that are doing it are fantastic. But when I tell people, okay, that in mind, you know what my equipment is? Where my right there,
Right? He's pointing to his head and his mind.
right? It's what you lived. It's what you studied, right? It's what you practiced. It's what you messed up. It's the mistakes you made in the bandstand, right there. Everything else, I sure do wish I would have had some of the mouthpieces and reeds and all that cool stuff back in 1970 or 73. In 73, I was playing up against Bill Doggett's Hammond B3 organ. I went to Manny's and bought a Lawton 10-star BB from Purvis Henson, the great tenor player, and I bought a Lawton baritone mouthpiece. And I think for those two mouthpieces, I don't think I paid $100. Yeah, man, and Purvis wasn't giving me a discount, and that was what was happening. The rest of it was me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, the sound because
I wish some of the cool stuff like the wireless mics and like I said, all that stuff, sax straps, etc., was happening then. It would have been cool because we were playing 4 sets a night.
Hmm.
And I love doing that. I mean, I've gotten into this to play, not complain about it.
This is actually pretty fascinating. Some of this insight, and the stories too. Actually, I do want to get into some of the stories as well. We're speaking about some of the current stuff you've been getting into, and I'm going to ask you at the end some of the stuff that's going to be coming up. But let's dive a little bit into your past in terms of you played with some great players. And not just as a soloist per se, as the solo horn, but also like in a big band, or in a horn section. Can you talk about, like you played with the Cab Calloway band or the Harry James, Tommy Dorsey. What was it like to be in a big band section?
I learned how to play in a section in Boston. I learned in school, and I learned from playing out in Revere Beach in big bands that were like 9 and 10 pieces, and you'd get a guy who was, a guy who came home from being on the road, and you'd sit aside of this guy, and you the whole night would be like, "Hey, did you see that? Hey," and after a while, you know, you started to learn something. And what was happening at Berklee, the guys there, like Andy McGee and John Laporta and Charlie Mariano, those guys were all great sax section players, and they were phenomenal. And this time, of actually playing gigs, one of the things that I think is missing today is headbands, and not the stuff you put around your head. Headbands, man. Like the original jam bands were Basie, Ellington. A lot of that music wasn't written. We need to get back to where somebody says to the trumpet section, "Hey, this is what's happening," and does that, and things with structure, not just totally like avant-garde structure. And you can only do that if you've been in a headband.
Yeah, can
It's
you
very, John Laporta had headbands, and it also developed your ear quick because he'd be down your throat, you know.
can you explain a
And
little bit more about a headband? Like, you be really specific. Some people have never heard
he
that
would
before.
sing a part to the saxes, and then we'd start playing over top of maybe like, the A section to rhythm changes, and then he'd cue the trombones and tell them to do a figure, and it would be sort of like almost like a rhythmic pop. And then he would tell the trumpets to do something, and then we'd be doing that, and that A section would be happening. Then he'd point to a trombone player, play solo, and then he'd get the backgrounds around the solo. I see these guys play solos today, and the solo might be really happening, but it could be fueled if there was some stuff behind it, man. I see the other guys just standing there, or, in some cases, texting somebody.
Yeah.
That never happened, man. I mean, when I played with, Cape May jazz festivals, and I got a lot of time to play with Bootsy Barnes, the great tenor player, there was always backgrounds behind the soloists. And if there was no background behind Bootsy, God bless him, he would tell you, "Where's my background?"
Oh,
That's what's missing today. I don't know, how many times guys have ever even heard this, because everybody, again, because of a lot of the internet and computer stuff, this is a new flavor to them, maybe, but if you listen to some of the real early bassy stuff, they couldn't have had charts.
yeah.
It wasn't happening. So a headband is like that. Also, some of the other headbands, were some of the rock bands that are considered jam bands.
Okay, right, right,
The Dead,
right. Fish, yeah,
the Allman Brothers. Well, before Fish, there was a
yeah.
Dead.
Right, right, right. That's true.
you know. But you get my drift. So that's what was happening. You know, I played with Butch Morris, which was an avant-garde-ish type of orchestra, and that, in essence, there was conduction and stuff going on, and I was playing only bassoon with Butch, but it was sort of like a headband. You had like a theme and a variation, then another theme and a variation, and sometimes it was pretty damn interesting.
This is very interesting. I honestly have never heard this kind of term before, and the thought that keeps coming into my head is, and it goes back to the concept we were talking about before, human interaction, and how you were saying that, and of course with the internet we kind of lose that. I mean, there are apps out there where you can, I don't know if it's called jam tracks or something like that, but you could actually jam with people all over the world. They have the technology to do that. I don't know if it's very precise in terms of the timing, but it gives people the opportunity to jam with others, those people that live in parts of the world where there are very few musicians. But just talking about the United States, I guess there's not as much human interaction. It almost seems like that's what you're kind of saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'm also saying we could do it too. It doesn't, every time you play or every time you sit in with somebody or every time you do something, it doesn't have to be something that has to be iPhoned and then 10 minutes later stuck on YouTube.
Right. That's true.
It's not that.
It's not about social media.
It's not about that. It's about development. I mean, seriously, I mean, and after a while, that 1 or 2 minutes or 45 seconds, like on Instagram, just, okay, cool, man. I mean, I know some guys that, I've actually said, there's one guy that I've really championed, and I said, man, you sound great. He sound fantastic. Great sound and stuff, and took care of some business, man. But these are guys that need to get out too, and I know they want to. The average person doesn't want to sit around, in their sweatpants with a cold piece of pizza making like 45-second videos a day. You have to be something wrong with you, man.
Especially if it's not New York pizza. Sorry, I had to put that out there.
It's got to be New York pizza, man.
It's got to be.
It's got to be New York pizza. There used to be a pizza place down the street from Berklee. You go out of the old Berklee on 1140 Boylston and make a right, and there was a pizza place, right? And that pizza place was happening for years. I was in withdrawal from that pizza place because all of us lived in that place. They had some kind of weird combination, like pizza and also freshly squeezed orange juice, which was like, yeah, hey, I can't believe I can remember that stuff, but
hey, food does it.
The other thing that I noticed with big bands playing in a section, when I first got out of Berklee and graduated, and I was playing in the Borscht Belt, the Catskills, or playing in big bands in New York. And those days, you didn't know everybody. Somebody would say, "Oh, make this Tuesday night Latin gig for me," and you'd turn the page, and the band would be playing, and I'd say to the alto player, "What are we playing?" He said, "There's no music. Follow me."
Wow.
And so, what do you do then? You got to use your ear, That and that's another complex situation, man. Some of the greatest bands, Mike and Randy Brecker had a band called Dreams, and those were some of the most incredible horn parts I heard in that type of a setting anywhere. And it sort of, propagated some things that happened on, pop and rock records by them. I'm sure there was no arranger in the booth sometimes when, to get something for, somebody who was just looking for a couple of horn pops or a line, or, people describe it to you in different ways. Yeah. It ends up sometimes kind of being the same, but in, that area, like Liberty, New York, which was called the Borscht Belt, or, the Jewish Alps and stuff,
right.
I played with a lot of people. And man, I also got fired for not, having the skill and the development. And you learn something like that. I mean, it wasn't like somebody, did it in a mean way. So man, you're 21 years old. And then I started playing other gigs up there. And after a while, sometimes I got hired back. And all of us, you don't learn anything unless you're fired. I mean, this is not AT&T or Verizon, you know, it's a very important thing. And when you're not playing with people, there can be a different reality. Somebody just might not like something they hear on 2 or 3 notes, and you have to be tuned into all this. It's tough. One of the best ways I've ever heard about playing in a section, because that's an experience-based thing. You know, Woody Herman had 3 tenors and a baritone, plus Woody on the top at times. Okay, I never played in Woody's band, but you know, other bands you listen to sax sections. Ellington's sax section was different than Basie's. You know, you listen to extensions of stuff like, you know, the early Thad Jones, Mel Lewis bands. You can hear which guys in those bands were Basieites.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
You know, and you can hear where stuff came from, you know. Um, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, people need to have a section, and they need to have stuff like that happens. And I always say, this is my greatest story for that. When I was writing for Sax Journal, I went to do an article on Jerome Richardson, right? And it was great. He had a place on 43rd Street, and he was in his later years, you know, and he had, you know, come back to New York to, you know, do things, and he was doing some shows and stuff, and playing in Clifford George's big band, you know. And so I said to him, hey man, I get up to do the article, you know, I get up there and I'm all ready to do the article, and there's him and Frank West with their flutes out and a 6-pack of beer, and you know, it was like, hey, Tim played his mouthpiece, you know, and he was putting like nail polish in a link. There's an old school thing, like to create like a little baffle, okay?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You see that in some of Gardala's mouthpieces, the ones that he did, the post bops and some of those things. It was like, you know, I know it because Dave told me that when I repeated that to him. Or, you know, you'd see that in a lot of guys' pieces. That was the start of sort of like a small baffle. So, you know, I started to play the mouthpiece, and here these two dudes like this at me.
Giving you a
Like
look.
like a lamb at a slaughter, and I'm like, oh, okay. And so we started talking about stuff, and I said to Jerome, tell me about playing in the section, because the article didn't start yet. You know, I used to have a cassette of it, and I said, well, you know, tell me about playing in a section. He said, playing in a section is experience. And I said, what about all those things where the section was like you and Zoot and Danny Bank, you know, and, you know, Selden Powell, those Oliver Nelson dates and those Gary McFarland dates. He says, we knew how each other smelled. We knew how each other was going to play or wasn't going to play. We knew everybody's strengths and weaknesses. And he said, it's because we played every day in all kinds of stuff together. And that's, boom, there it is.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you something though. Okay, back in the day, people playing every day, right? Getting paid. Yeah. But nowadays, gigs are getting more and more sparse because people.
Exactly.
Yeah, because people, and it's a whole bunch of things going on. People, there's so much stuff going on. People are just, you know, distracted. There's so many things to choose from, but also not many people know what jazz really is. You know, they think jazz is the pop music that's on the radio, and you're just playing it on a saxophone or playing it on a trumpet. So, you know, nowadays, I guess, how would we get to that type of situation that you know, that you're talking about? I mean, I could easily say, oh, well, you just create your own situation, but I think that's the thing that people run up against, is that those kinds of situations don't exist anymore.
I'm very lucky at the age I'm at that those situations were available to me to
Yeah.
be able to sit in with Sonny Stitt and, you know, get stuck on the bandstand where I couldn't get off, you know, and I had to come up when they called a ballad medley, and you know, I was in between Stitt and Harold Vick, and so as Andy McGee would say, I had to come up with something.
Yeah.
And you know, it made me a better player instantly. And it also made me, when I practiced with a different intention. You got to play like you're going to do something. You just can't play like the same stuff all the time. Um, it's a different thing. But I really, like I said, I'm very grateful that those environments existed. I used to play Mondays at Gertz in Philly back in the '70s when I was around. I'd borrow my mom's car, drive down there, hang out, play with Don Patterson and Vance Wilson, a great tenor player who's on one of the Clifford Brown records, The Beginning to the End, and some other stuff. He had huge sound. I mean, I'm serious. He had a huge sound. He'd play and it'd be like, whoa.
Wow.
Whoa. And I got to start playing with Don Patterson because of doing that. But the world, we live in a different world. And sometimes, I got to realize, okay. But I try to get guys to, the organ group I had at the garage, that was all young guys that were, within the school that I was teaching at.
Okay.
And it was a happening thing. And a lot of my friends would come in and sit in, and they got a chance to play with some cool people too, and also experience some personalities.
Well, let me ask you something though. So, you're a teacher also, and you've taught at colleges and that kind of thing. What do you tell students today, with regard to this topic of conversation? What do you tell students today?
It's difficult. It really is, man. I had a student that was from Reading, Pennsylvania, and he went to Berklee. And I told him, I says, start looking at some of the technology too. So he does recording engineering now as well. So he was able to make a left and get into that so that he could sort of focus on that, because not everyone can be like a high school band director or a college teacher. That fork in the road, I saw this guy, he was, had a lot of mechanical skills. His name was Mike Korch, and he's happening. And he was one of those guys. So that fork in the road for him, thank God, I knew what was going on at Berklee, and it worked. So I try to tell guys, keep your eyes open, talk to people. There's nobody in a school today, that won't understand a student saying, hey, what should I be doing? I mean, they understand that. It's a concern that all of us have. And it's something that can be satisfying, because the more we talk about it, the more it's going to come up.
True.
When Rachel Z and I would have things, we would use different people, like on situations that were students, and put them on the bandstand with us on gigs. I mean, they had to play at a good level and handle it, and all that. But there was no iPads and real books. So you've got to, again, people have to sit down and talk to each other face to face. Texting and emailing, that's a beautiful thing, man. And I've gotten a chance to know hundreds of people and stuff like that. But those same hundreds of people, I'd like to get on the bandstand with and play a monk tune, man. And just have some fun and just look at each other, like Cannibal said, and say, yeah. Because, again, not everything is always like somebody's best solo or their worst solo or whatever, but it's the joy of playing. It's something that musicians have that, I don't know too many other places that have that. And maybe this what we're doing here might propagate some people to do this.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that. But you know what? I gotta ask about this. A lot of people are so afraid to play or improvise in public because fear of looking foolish, fear of being yelled at, fear of, I guess not meeting everyone else's standards. So I want to dive into this a little bit deeper. But what you just said about playing music for the joy of it, what I found with a lot of very well-known players, especially people like yourself, it's not that, when people, yes, people have to be at a certain level, but when people perform with you, it's not like, oh, they made a whole bunch of mistakes, they suck. It's more like, what is that person saying? And, it's the joy of performing with them. So how do you, okay, with your students or even just the listeners here and stuff like that who go through that fear of performing in public, what kind of like mindset ideas, tips can you give them?
I'll give them what Alan Dawson, the great drummer, told me. When Alan started playing with Dave Brubeck, and I saw like the halls they were playing in, right? Compared to Lenny's on the Turnpike, or he was like one of the great drummers on a lot of the prestige records, with Booker Irvin and all those people, Sonny Chris. And so, I said, Alan, you're in almost like a stadium sometimes with this. And he said, this is what I do. I take 3 deep breaths, bring it in, let it out my nose. He says, and then it's up to me and I play. He says, that dispels that nervousness in your back and your lungs. And for me, that did wonders because my lungs are good then. And so I can concentrate. Your lungs aren't like, that stuff's not happening. And again, it also helps you. And, if you go out to a session and somebody vibes you, bring it, man. Go ahead. Because that's only a learning experience. After a while, it's not going to bother you. It's like the first time you drive across a bridge. The first time you drive across, like, the Tappan Zee or one of those. I'm mentioning the bridge that you would know.
Right.
Your tendency is like, what? And then after a while, it's like, so again, is to do it and see what it feels like. And after a while, you got it. And that's what I call bandstand command, because there's always going to be somebody that's got some kind of itch about something, and that's okay. That's human nature. I always tell guys, everybody does sort of hear something differently, you know, but what we can do is we can get together as a family of musicians and make it work. So again, leaving the house and maybe the piano player only knows 3 tunes, and maybe you're playing in somebody's rec room that has like a great piano, but all those things add up to having the confidence to say to somebody, you know, can I play a tune with you? It's important. It's very important. I mean, sometimes it's impossible. Somebody's playing a concert, you just can't do that. But it's also a good. It's just food for thought. I hope that helps some people.
Definitely. Okay, Tim, I'm so grateful for, you spending the time with us today. Um, so what's coming up for you starting like in January 2019?
I'm starting the year off right. We've got a gig the first Friday at the Barnes Foundation in Philly with one of the Philadelphia Jazz Project concerts, and it's a Philly soul. It's called, it's about Pollock, TNT Jones, nice band. And then the next day, I play at the Lafayette Jazz Bar in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is almost in my hood, sort of. And I continue my stuff where I teach in New York once a week, sometimes twice a week. I teach on Skype. I teach in Reading, Pennsylvania. People come to Reading from all kinds of places. One of my students used to drive down once a month from Toronto.
Wow.
Another guy, Jimmy Carpenter, who's a great R&B, blues player, used to drive up from the Washington D.C. area. So I try to keep myself moving. I try to keep myself, doing things. I'm still studying. I take an oboe lesson a month with a great oboe player in Brooklyn. Katie Shayla. And I hope I pronounced the last name right. But anyhow, um, I try to keep it like that, and also just try to keep my mind happening.
You know what's really great? Two things.
Plus Nam.
Oh, that's right. NAM's coming up. That's right. That's right. Now, what's great is that you've said that you're still learning, and that's inspiring for a lot of people. Um, but also all the stuff you said about mindset too, I think really, really has helped a lot of people. One final question, and I'm going to steal this from my co-host Nick, and it's this: if there was in the past year or two, if you made a purchase that was like under $100 that you felt was so valuable, what was that purchase? If you don't mind sharing that with us.
Would it have to be musical?
No, doesn't have to be.
That's a hard decision, man, because um, it could be anything, you know? It could, you know, I mean, the most simple thing, it could have been a parking ticket, otherwise I would be like, not able to drive to gigs. Or it could have been, it could have been anything. Here's something that most people need to consider, though. Think about it, man. You know, you've got to have, how can I put it? You got to have an x-ray of yourself. Make sure you go into the eye doctor. Make sure you go into the dentist. Because when something goes wrong, they want to know what's shaking. You end up in an emergency ward or something cuckoo. And I'm not that kind of guy. But as I get older, I've been out here a long time. I'm no sage. But they need a blueprint of you.
Yeah, and we are our instrument. Even if you play a saxophone or trumpet or whatever, we are our instrument. We have to keep it in good health.
You know, you can't play,
Yeah.
if you've got all kinds of things that are preoccupying you health wise. So I tell guys, flat out, don't fool around, man.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. You got to take it seriously. Thanks so much, Tim. Listen, I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to catching up with you again this year.
Well, we'll be at NAM, right? And no video would be complete without my man. This is the brains behind it all here.
That's awesome. That's a great ending picture.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks so much, Tim. I appreciate it.
Likewise.